Hello, and good afternoon, Performance and Marketing Moscow. It is great to be back here. I was here 2 years ago, and I love seeing my face on a screen that's this big. It's really awesome. I know Pavel said I'm a comedian. I'm not, I just look funny. That's literally it. That's the jokes. So I want to firstly start by talking about the last time that I was in Moscow. And thank you to you guys, because it was an incredible experience. And I'm not sure why this isn't clicking. Let me see. Okay, so the last time I was here, still not working. Okay, we got there. Last time I was here was for the World Cup. And you guys put on the most fantastic show. It really was a brilliant World Cup. It gave me the opportunity to come with my son to his first football match. And I want to take you on my completely digital journey. So when you think about it, I actually live in Tel Aviv. So you might be wondering why an Israeli is coming to see England in the football. My physical home is Israel. My football, or some might say religious home, is England. And unfortunately, as an Arsenal supporter, I haven't had much to celebrate in the last few years. So I decided that miraculously, once England had got to the semi-finals, there was no way I was going to miss this. And I'd already been looking, I was trying to get tickets, I'd looked at flights, but every interaction that I was having around trying to get to this World Cup was a digital experience. I was posting on Facebook, I was WhatsApping people, and eventually someone at 6 p.m. the night before the game messages me on Facebook Messenger and says, I've got 2 tickets, do you want to go? I'd been checking flights, I'd been looking into it, but I hadn't got that far. I was like, yes, get me the tickets, I want to come. I immediately go online, I try and book flights, I book flights. So from 6 p.m. the night before to 3 a.m. the next morning, when I got on the plane, I had to get everything and understand everything I needed to do to come to Moscow for the World Cup. That included waking up my kid at 10 o'clock at night, placing him against the wall to take a picture so we could register on the Fan ID website, which is why he looks a little bit like a criminal in that picture. So we get to the airport, we land, I immediately get out my phone, I go on to Get Taxi, which I use anywhere in Tel Aviv, I get into a cab, I come to Red Square, I check Google Maps, I go to some restaurants, I hang out with the England fans, I get to the game, I use an Uber to get back. Everything about the experience that I'm having is digital. Yet, it was one of the most emotional analog experiences I've ever had. It was an incredible opportunity, and I genuinely really thought that football was coming home. Video? So then the first goal went in, and we really thought that it was coming home. And literally this was going to be it. This was going to be England's year. Football was going to come home. It was absolute bedlam, phenomenal stadium, brilliant experience. And then, unfortunately, football didn't come home, we did. So, literally, we got back on the plane after a great experience, after an incredible analog experience. But today, you guys know that we live in a digital world. Everything that we do, everything that we touch, everything has digital footprint, has a digital echo. And even though this was very much a right side of the brain experience, it was emotional. And by the way, that's why brands pay so much money to be attached to that experience. It's an emotional experience. It sparks the imagination. It's why sport is still so fundamental to creativity and art and everything that we do. However, there are 2 aspects to the left side. One was that there was a lot of organization involved in it. I had to go through a lot of process, a lot of structures. And secondly, when we start analyzing those experiences, we can really get into the facts and the data as to what exists there. So today I want to give you a little bit of the story behind the World Cup, a little bit of what the data is showing me after the fact that we can learn for future events or how to analyze other events. And I think this is incredibly important because you guys in the room are the performance marketing professionals in Russia. You guys have a better understanding of the SEO, of the PPC, of the keywords, of everything that's happening in that digital world. And I want to help you guys think a little bit further than you do today. So if your job is just optimizing SEO or choosing which keyword campaign to run, have a think about the fact that the data that easily sits within your control, data which is easily available, tells a story, gives you understanding as to what's really happening out there, and enables you to drive your companies, your businesses, your careers forward. That's why at SimilarWeb, we don't just call it data, we call it market intelligence. We want you guys to be able to take that information and really drive the market forward in terms of what you're doing. So, I'm going to take you on a little bit of that journey because timing is everything. So one of the first things that we look at is trying to analyze when did people start getting interested in the World Cup? When was the peak time where people started visiting FIFA.com? When were they actually looking at things? And we can see there's a baseline between July and September where, no one's really that interested yet. It's very early days. Phase 1, first set of tickets go on sale. Then there's first come, first serve. Then phase 2 application. Then first come, first serve. And then all those people like me who are looking into things and getting excited at the last minute. Now that's the FIFA.com website. What we can also analyze is which countries are most interested in this, bearing in mind that this is a global sporting event. And I'm sure you guys saw your city and your country mobbed with fans from all over the world. What I found really fascinating about sitting in the stadium was that I was literally surrounded by people from all over the world who weren't necessarily England or Croatian fans. And you can see here that you've got the Russians, obviously, home nation, but people left it relatively late to start really applying for their tickets. Interestingly, United States still had a pretty high interest in the World Cup. And what I find really incredible is that the German interest is kind of consistent the entire way through. And those guys really, they planned in advance, they looked at it in advance, they knew exactly what they were doing at every step of the way. You can see there that the English interest really spiked towards the end, because I don't think anyone believed we were going to be as successful as we were. And you can see as well the Brazilians got very, very interested, I think just after they qualified in and around that April period. One of the other things that we can do is we can actually have a look with SimilarWeb at what websites people that visited FIFA.com were also interested in. And this is really fascinating because you can see here in phase 1 what visitors from America were most interested in if they were going to the FIFA.com website. What was the overlap? What other websites did they go and visit? And the first one that completely threw me when I looked at it was in the first kind of early period, that phase 1 and phase 2, Persian football, Iranian football was incredibly interesting in the United States, where there's a big Iranian expatriate community, a big Persian community, who were obviously incredibly excited with the United States not qualifying, that they still had a team that they could be following in the World Cup. When we get into that second phase, it becomes very clear that the interest of the visitors to FIFA.com are primarily looking to plan a trip. They are looking for tickets. You can see specifically they overlap with the Fan ID website, and that's showing intention that they're actually looking to come. Finally, as we get to the late stage, no one from America was doing what I was doing and getting on the plane at the semi-final stage. They were really just interested in seeing how they could consume information and content. So we go further than that. And understanding how to work with data is really about playing the right pass. Being able to build an online strategy cannot be done in silo. And one of the sites that was also fundamentally important to understanding the World Cup experience was the Fan ID website. Now, I know there's a lot of information that's already been released in terms of where visitors came from, but when we look at the data just on the Fan ID website, we see those two big spikes over when the tickets were released, and then we see that kind of tail end as people came last minute, had to get on the Fan ID website, and people started to realize that it actually wasn't that difficult to get the Fan IDs, to get to games, and to get into Russia. And you can even see the countries that started spiking around that. So you see obviously the large Russian interest, you see again, a more consistent interest from some of the countries like Brazil, but here you start to see excuse me, the most interest there from the UK that peaked at the last minute as well. So really, we want to try and understand how you guys can build that, how you guys can build that perfect strategy. And I generally don't like giving any presentations without talking about food. Usually I have a big graphic of food, but in this one, I went for the takeaway option. So who are the winners when we look at the interest and the demand that came from the Russian World Cup? And you can see here, very interestingly, KFC and Burger King did very well in terms of increasing their website traffic and demand during the World Cup. If we look at McDonald's, though, it actually didn't do well. Now, this may be that people weren't going to their websites, the shops were more easily signposted, maybe they didn't take a key strategy around this. The other thing that's interesting is the two Russian brands, Tanuki and Pizza Sushi, also didn't really increase by that much. However, our restaurant Guru saw a massive increase during the World Cup. Now, again, some of this may be from local demands, some of it may be from tourist demands, but you start to see that if you build the correct strategy around an event, it can actually pay off. Now, what's interesting to me is in the case of McDonald's, they heavily invested in display advertising during that World Cup. Now, when I say display advertising, I'm talking about online display advertising, and I think for them, it was a case of maybe working on the brand presence, but not necessarily driving that through into traffic to the web. What seems to be interesting is that Restaurant Guru, who focused on a social strategy, actually did very well at increasing demand through to the website as well. So we start to see those combined efforts, the more holistic marketing strategies seem to work. Even when you do them as small as KFC did, it still drove a lot of traffic. One of the other things is that obviously when people come to a sporting event like this, they're not just coming for the football. And I wanted to look at ancillary things that people did. So someone in the office suggested, have a look at dating apps. I was like, okay, let's have a look at the dating apps. And we see actually the benchmark for Russian dating apps below didn't really change during the World Cup in Russia. However, there is one app that saw a massive increase during this time, and that was Tinder. And actually, not only with SimilarWeb can you look at the increase to a specific app, but now we know what the football fans were doing when they weren't watching football. We can see actually there was a massive increase on specific days as well. So you can see on non-match days compared to the final or compared to the semi-finals, there was far more traffic on Tinder than on some of those key match days that came about as well. So we start to really build up an idea and an understanding of how to partner and who to work with. Now, if you were like me and you were watching the World Cup, you probably saw a brand that you'd never heard of before on the advertising hoardings. and it was the Wonder Group. Did anyone else see that when they were watching the World Cup? They saw this random Chinese company throw up their name on the billboards. It was called Wonder Group. And if you were like me and you're just the slightest bit kind of inquisitive, you did what I did, opened up your phone, stuck in Wonder Group, and were like, who are these guys? Turns out they're a massive Chinese conglomerate and consortium, and China had a huge interest in the World Cup, which I've not really gone into in this deck. But you can start understanding exactly how well this paid off. Because we all know one of the biggest challenges in marketing is attribution. How can you actually tell whether sponsoring something as expensive but as expansive as the World Cup is actually worth it? So with SimilarWeb, we were able to dive in and just see, did it generate web traffic? And you can see here for some of the bigger brands like Nike and McDonald's, etc., there was a little bit, but really not that much. When we come in here, we can even see a brand like Budweiser, who didn't have that much traffic before, they also increased. But when we look at it and we start looking at Wonder Group, they went up by over 1,123%. It's a huge increase. And by the way, nearly 70, I think it's actually nearly 80% of the traffic to Wonder Group was from mobile. So exactly what I said, people were going on their phones and they were trying to figure it out. Now, what's interesting is, I don't think Wonder Group built a holistic strategy because they didn't have a key call to action on their website. Their mobile site wasn't even mobile optimized in order to make use of the fact that people were coming there from the World Cup and just wanted to know who they were. And this allowed them to really build their brand. It definitely builds brand, it builds presence, people hear about you, but what are you then going to do with that traffic? What are you then going to do with that information? I also wanted to have a look at how long the long tail of the World Cup still lasted for in Russia. So I decided to have a look at the keywords related to Russian soccer team shirts, football shirts. How much is there still traffic that's increasing for that? And we can see that there actually is still a good amount of search traffic on those keywords related to buying the soccer shirts. And I wanted to drive into two of the sites that are still seeing good amounts of increase in traffic off those keywords, one of which was Adidas. And interestingly, one of them was VSE Mirku, who actually managed to drive that traffic based on Croatian shirts. Now, I'm fascinated as to whether people in Russia were ignited and inspired by the Croatian team, but I found it very interesting that people are still buying not just Russian shirts, but Croatian shirts as well in the Russian area. So really what we're looking at here now is taking these learnings, and I wanted to show what we just did was a backward analysis of an event that has already taken place, right? It's retroactive. I'm looking at the World Cup and I'm saying, great, the World Cup was good. How do I learn from it? Next sporting event, next strategy. What about something that hasn't yet happened? Can data be the catalyst for a new idea? Can data inspire me to a new campaign or help me not just retroactively analyze something, but actually understand something that hasn't yet happened? And for this, I decided to look at the next big global sporting event that's taking place, Tokyo. And actually, I spent a fair amount of time in Tokyo, and they're really starting to gear up now for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. So, and you can see that even on the web traffic. So people are already starting to hit the Tokyo 2020 website, starting to look at what they're interested. And we see that that interest is not just from the home nation, as we saw with the World Cup. Around 6-7 months ago, it was literally half of the traffic was not from Japan. Now the Japanese, I think in the city itself, has really started gearing up, and a lot more of the traffic is coming from the city. What we can do here is even start analyzing the keywords that are driving traffic to the Tokyo 2020 site. And when we look at this, just for the US market, we notice two very interesting trends for me. One of them is around volunteering. Now, I remember from the London 2012 Olympics, volunteering was huge, and I saw it here in Moscow at the World Cup as well. Volunteering at big sporting events has become a massive thing. People want to feel part of the event, they want to feel part of the experience, and volunteering has become a massive key part of this. And again, I think that trend is going to continue at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Not even just for Japanese people, but you're seeing here Americans who are also interested in volunteering opportunities at that Olympic Games. The second one that I found fascinating is skateboarding. Skateboarding is a brand new Olympic sport for 2020, and it is already showing more interest than any of the other sports. Partly because it's new, but partly because I think it's going to be absolutely huge. So we start to see that. Again, with SimilarWeb, we can see what other websites people are interested in. So if we want to build a campaign around tourists who are interested in the 2020 Olympics, we know that they're looking at Japan Times, Truly Tokyo. They're even looking at their calendar to start scheduling it. So we start seeing those trends. And we can do the same things for the Japanese market of people in Japan who are visiting that Tokyo 2020 site. By the way, we can do it for Tokyo as well. So you can do this for any market, for any site, for any industry, which is where I take the challenge back to you guys. As marketeers in Russia, as being the leaders in digital in your industries, start thinking about what you would want to analyze, what data you would want to see, where you want to come up with those ideas, or prove or disprove gut instinct or theories that you have. So again, with the Tokyo site, we see volunteering is very high, we see skateboarding is very high, and we actually start to see more interest in the specific ticket sites. So ID Tokyo, which is their equivalent of the fan ID, and city volunteering, etc. Finally, we can extrapolate on those specific keywords again, and we can see all of the sports that are of interest already in the keywords for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. And we see karate, which is another new sport, cycling, and golf, which is also going to be new for the Olympics. So you start to really start seeing that. One of the other things is you can actually build a strategy around that. And if you have a look, you can see this really small random website in Japan, High Five Skate, is already picking off traffic from the Olympic skateboarding keyword. So they realize that if they build an SEO strategy around that, they can actually capitalize on it and they can actually get a lot of value from it already at this stage. So there's a huge amount of opportunity out there. And I think the key here is that you guys, when you combine the data that you have today, that you already know about, pretty much everyone in the audience had heard of SimilarWeb. However, my concern when I look at the Russian market and SimilarWeb's presence within it is that you guys are using this data as a siloed source of information to just tell you your vanity metric. You know, hey, I'm the 20th biggest website in Russia. I'm number 5 in my industry. That's great. It's a vanity metric. It's not smart. It doesn't really tell you anything. You can't redefine your strategy off it. You can't do anything with that. Where SimilarWeb has evolved and moved to, and where the market is moving to, is taking that type of data, which is now ubiquitous. It's everywhere. There's a huge amount of data. Combining it and working smartly and cleverly with your own data, with your own instinct, with your own creativity, taking that data and turning it into intelligence, understanding the market. When you think about the way the world used to be for market intelligence, you would have to pay a company like Nielsen or GfK huge amounts of money, sometimes millions of dollars, just to tell you that skateboarding is probably going to be really big at the Olympics. And they would do it by surveying maybe 10,000 people, 3,000 people. Here, SimilarWeb is using hundreds of millions of users and helping you understand the real trend of what is happening in the market. So when you guys take that data, combine it, understand it, build your strategies around it, come up with creative ideas, to drive your markets forward, you actually really can do it very, very well. So getting that perspective and looking back at your own internal measurement can unlock huge potential. And this shouldn't be looked at in silo, it should be looked at along with your business intelligence, along with your analytics data, and combining those pieces together. So really you want to make sure that you've got that full holistic view and that you're understanding things exactly as you need to. I'm going to leave you with my personal highlight of the World Cup for me. So what was great was we got to the stadium a little bit earlier, and we took that opportunity to get to the stadium. And actually, if we roll the video, you can see that not only was I up on the big screen before this, but this was the global feed that went out from FIFA to all of the sites. I don't know whether the video is going to work on this, though. Is it going to work? It might do if I go here. 1 second. Yep. So me and my boy were up on screen, broadcast to, I think, was an audience of a couple of 100 million. So when you take that opportunity to, step forward and go on an experience, you sometimes don't even realize how far that reach can be. And I've no idea how many people saw that. I've no idea where it was, but it really was that ability for us to capitalize on an emotional experience. And I think as marketeers, some things can't be measured, but a lot of things can. And I think those things that can't be measured, you often have a gut instinct as to the value of them and to the reach of them and to doing them. However, it's very difficult sometimes to make that argument. If you would go into your meetings or your management and you'd say, look, I have a gut feel that we should go and advertise at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Or I think that we should invest in a product that maybe integrates skateboarding. And they'd go, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. However, when you come with data, you change the entire conversation. This is really important. I don't know how many people have heard the acronym HIPPO, right? A HIPPO is a highest paid person opinion. And every time you go into a meeting, very often, the highest paid person opinion is the one that wins. And the only way to overcome highest paid person opinion in a meeting is to walk into that meeting with data. Now, the BI industry knew that data in its past life was, the first 20 minutes of every meeting was spent arguing over who had the right data, right? I've got a spreadsheet. My spreadsheet says these are the numbers. I've got another spreadsheet. If anyone here is using both Google Analytics and Adobe, they're going to know that they're going to have two different metrics when they walk into a meeting in terms of what the real numbers are for your web analytics, right? So that problem still exists, but BI has started to change that and started to really improve that. I think now where we've evolved to is that there are other data points and other metrics that we need to use as well. What we want to enable you guys to do is, number one, find those new ideas and those new areas from within the market and within the data that we have. And on the other hand, back up and substantiate the ideas that you have, being able to walk into those meetings with the data that you need to back up your ideas. And not only that, then take those ideas forward with the correct strategies so that you're building the right campaigns and you're building the right marketing going forward. So once again, thank you for the memories, which will last a lifetime, and the data that we're going to be able to learn from.
Avi, such an invigorating ending to the conference. So considerate of you to translate the presentation. My question is, who did the job?
Not me. we have a relatively big Russian team, so the guys at the office did it.
So nice. Друзья, ваш последний шанс быть услышанным на всей аудитории и задать вопрос. Микрофон бы еще, вообще бы классно было.
Thank you very much. That was a really outstanding performance. Loads of pleasure. My name is Alexei. My question might sound a little bit abstract, but anyway, it seems like what she told us means that these methods of analyzing data and making conclusions out of it are absolutely universal, and that basically you eradicate any borders between countries or cultures or whatsoever. You went to Japan, you went to Russia, you analyzed different search criteria all over the world. Is it the case, or you might say that for certain countries, for instance, for Russia, you might need a particular kind of approach, particular criteria? Do you need to take into account the local culture or the local mentality or anything like that? Or are you saying that it's all absolutely universal? Thank you.
So I think that it's even further than that. I think data on its own is useless to a certain extent. I think in terms of the fact that I flick between countries and things like that, the digital experience is universal. Right? Everywhere you go in the world, everyone's sitting there on a mobile phone. Everywhere you go in the world has the same ubiquitous collection of digital touch points. That's something that is everywhere. The cultural nuance within it 100% exists. And the platforms, by the way, have a massive amount of variance, which you see within SimilarWeb. So you know that if you're going to Korea, Line is the primary messaging app. If you go to China, it's going to be WeChat. If you go to Japan, people primarily are on Facebook. Twitter's non-existent. If you go somewhere else, Twitter's used in a different way, etc., etc. Taiwan is a Facebook-only country. So you have to understand the nuances within the country, and you have to understand the nuances within the expectation for that country when you're building your strategy. 100% correct. A strategy I build, whether it's online or whether it's business, for one country doesn't always work exactly the same in the other, and Uber learned this the very hard way in Japan when they tried to enter the market. However, the data itself is still relevant, and the methodology of using that data should never be used in silo. It should be part of a wider conversation and a wider discussion. However, you have to bring data into those discussions now. You won't survive. This isn't the 1950s in New York where Don Draper walks into a meeting and he goes, I had a crazy idea, and everyone goes, oh my God, that's brilliant, right? You're at the point where you have to come up with some data to back up what you're saying, or you stand a higher chance of failure. Sometimes you won't, you'll get lucky, but you have a higher chance of being successful by understanding even some of that nuance in country with the data that you need.
Друзья, еще вопросы? Есть один.
Спасибо большое за выступление. У меня вопрос. Я сейчас видел несколько новостей, и вот, может быть, вы подтвердите, что посещаемость сайтов для взрослых очень сильно падает во время чемпионата мира по футболу. И да или нет? И какие сайты еще дико теряют в посещаемости во время таких зрелищ? Какого рода? Там киношные, может быть, или еще какие-то? Спасибо.
The question is whether porn sites actually lose their audience. During such events, are there any other websites?
To be honest with you, there's an incredible blog that you can read that Pornhub release. Pornhub have their own data blog where they actually specifically look at dates and they tell you exactly how much the traffic varies. I'll be honest with you, I didn't investigate it for this for this presentation. It's very easy to do inside SimilarWeb. You can see the data on a day-by-day basis. My understanding from Pornhub is that from the blog that I've read is that generally big sporting events have a massive drop. Specific holidays as well have very big drops in certain countries. So there's definitely data to analyze. As I said, in every sphere, in every industry, everywhere in the world, there's data to analyze. Yeah, we haven't done that type of analysis, but it's there. Worth reading the blog.
Thank you. Друзья, давайте скажем такое же бодрое спасибо, какая была презентация.
Thank you.